Hey, welcome to the channel. Over the last year, I've gone back and forth on whether or not I should make this video because after researching this case, my conclusion is that the family is involved somehow with Aja's disappearance. And in this video, we'll go through the timeline and evidence so that at the very least, you'll understand why I think that the family is involved. But of course, that's just my opinion, and I could be wrong. And in this case, if I'm wrong, then I'm going on the internet to accuse an innocent family of being involved in their daughter's disappearance, which by any objective moral standard is messed up. And beyond that, the time it takes to research these cases and build a mental model that explains all of the missing details and facts, well, that's the hard part because that's why the case is unsolved, because nobody has done that yet. And then writing a script, recording that script, then editing the video, syncing the audio, all of that, just to potentially be wrong about the case and therefore accuse innocent people of harming their daughter. So you could understand why I haven't released this video or generally worked on this channel much. However, the point of the channel originally, it's never been about clout or money or fame. It's always been about getting ideas that are lingering in my head out of my head so I can move on with my own life. And so with that framing, yes, I believe that the abduction of Aja Degree was orchestrated from her house that night. I believe that she was essentially paraded down the highway so people would see her to give the reasonable presumption that she therefore left the house on her own free will and was then abducted by a stranger off of the highway. In this video, we'll go through the timeline and evidence, and I will explain, and hopefully you'll see, why that narrative doesn't make any sense. But first, I want you to think about this. Who has incentive for Aja to be seen walking down the highway at 4 o'clock in the morning in the freezing rain? It's certainly not Aja, right? It's freezing raining. She's not wearing a coat. There's no obvious destination that she could be going to or any reason that she could be going there. Nobody has ever came out and said, oh yeah, me and Aja used to meet up before school. Or, oh yeah, I used to see Aja, walking through the neighborhood early in the morning. It's contrary to everything that we know about her, being afraid of the dark, being afraid of strangers and of dogs. And according to one of the witnesses, Jeff Roop, when he does his turnaround to go and get a better look at her, she runs off into the dark, into the shrubbery. So she must have some inclination that she doesn't want to draw attention to herself by walking alongside of the road. So why is she doing that? If she isn't afraid of the dark, of walking not along the highway, then why was she walking along the highway in the first place? Second, if you want to assume that she was lured out by some offender, for which there's no evidence, why would they have her walk down the highway when anybody driving along could see her, including the police or potentially other offenders? But then this person then puts themselves on the highway to abduct her. This is like me saying, I'm going to go rob a bank. But before I do that, I'm going to go send a child into the bank all alone and just looking out of place to draw a bunch of attention to the child and then therefore the bank. And then I'm going to go rob the bank. Why would you do that? Why draw all of the attention to the location where you're going to commit the crime at? If anything, if somebody is this close to her, they've been grooming her, they could have just picked her up at school, just signed her out of school. Also in this scenario, if somebody had said to her, hey, meet me at the shed at 4 a.m., well, she would have no way to know what time it was because the power was out in the neighborhood. And also, she then has to wake up without an alarm clock because an alarm clock wakes up her brother who's sleeping in the same room. How is it even possible that somebody could be luring her out and coordinating this with her if she literally cannot know what time it is when she wakes up or what time she's going to wake up? I'm 32 years old. I can't time when I'm going to wake up, especially if I don't know what time it is, if I have no other frame of reference for it. I personally think it is literally logistically impossible for her to have either planned to leave, like running away or meeting somebody, because she doesn't know what time it is and she has no way to control what time she wakes up. It only makes sense if the abduction is orchestrated from the house. Because in that scenario, you would want her to be seen walking away from the house down the highway of her own free will. But she has no reason to do that. The only reason she would do that is if someone she trusted told her to do that. Who does she trust more than her parents? And all throughout this case, the assertion that Aja got up and left in the middle of the night is coming from her parents, mainly Harold. But there's no reason to assume that. He even says it in the 911 call when there's no way to have known what could have happened. Nobody saw her get up and leave out of the house. No neighbors saw her walking down the street, even though, again, Harold says this in the 911 call. There's no record of evidence of this. And I could be off base here, but if my child was missing in the morning, I don't think my first assumption would be that they left. I think my mind would go to the worst case scenario, which is that they were abducted. Somebody was in the house and took them. But nonetheless, hopefully now you understand how I think about this case. And so with that being said, let's start at the very top and go through the timeline and evidence. Aja Degree was 9 years old when she disappeared on February 14th, 2000. She lived with her family, her brother, O'Brien Degree, her father, Harold Degree, and her mother, Aquila Degree, in Shelby, North Carolina, in Western North Carolina. By all accounts, this was a good family. Aja was a great student, great grades, no discipline, no reports of any trouble with this family. But I will say that by all accounts, the BTK killer was a normal guy with a normal family life. The Zodiac killer has gone on to live their entire life, never getting caught. So people have met the Zodiac killer. Maybe hundreds of people have met this person. And in their mind, they're just a normal guy, but it's the Zodiac killer. So you never know what's going on in a person's head. And just because they have a good image of this Christian Southern family, that doesn't mean that they're not involved in their daughter's disappearance. It doesn't mean that they are either. But it seems like a lot of commentary on this case online gets filtered through that lens of, oh, the Degrees are upstanding people, and therefore viewing them as potential suspects is harmful or detrimental. But I mean, we have countless examples of seemingly normal people and normal families being involved in crazy shit. So the public perception of anybody, I find irrelevant. I only care about the facts and the evidence and making reasonable assumptions and using common sense. And wherever that leads us, that's where it leads us. Like, I hate when people say, oh, I don't see how a mother could kill her child. Well, it happens every day. It happens every day. Just because in your worldview it doesn't happen, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen in reality. So I try my best to not let that stuff cloud my judgment, because we have to live on the planet that we actually live on and not the one that we want to live on or think that we live on. So nonetheless, so the weekend leading up to Aja's disappearance, February 12th, Aja and O'Brien both have basketball games, so they're both on their basketball teams. This was Aja's first year playing basketball, and by all accounts, she was very good. She ended up being the star player. Aja's team lost the championship game, and this was the first loss of the season. And Aja fouled out, so she had a bad game, and it seems like she took this very hard. She was very sad. But by the end of O'Brien's game, she seemed fine. Now, some people think that Aja ran away because of this basketball game. Now, that's certainly an opinion, but it's contrary to the FBI's analysis that children don't run away up until the age of 12. And in those cases, it's usually abuse that's making them run away. Running away for a basketball game, it would also require her to wake up with no alarm, not know what time it is, sneak out of the house, etc. Also, the other kids were also upset. We got over it. I would bet everything that I own that she didn't run away because she lost a basketball game. After the game, Aja attended a sleepover with about a dozen cousins hosted by their 15-year-old cousin. The next day, February 13th, the Degree family attends church. Afterwards, they spent time at another relative's house. So this is very common down south. You go to church and then you go to church again, but it's usually in the parking lot of the church or somebody's house. But it's not really church. It's like you're just hanging around with the same people that you were hanging around with at church. So they do that until approximately 6:30 p.m. when they return home. According to O'Brien, Aja's tired from the basketball game, from staying up late at the sleepover, from church, from visiting the aunt's house, etc. So according to O'Brien, Aja goes to bed early at this time. She has a headache, so she goes to lay down early at 6:30 p.m. Around 8:30 p.m., the rest of the family, that being O'Brien, Harold, and Aquila, are in the living room watching the NBA All-Star game. But then the power goes out. So it's unclear exactly what time the power goes out. However, somebody in the neighborhood runs into a utility pole, which knocks out all the electricity to the neighborhood. Also, the timeline from this point on gets a bit fuzzy and unclear. That could be because the electricity is off. It could be because there's some misdirection in the statements. Nonetheless, according to O'Brien, sometime after the power goes out, Aja wakes up and joins the rest of the family in the living room where Harold has set up a kerosene heater. Then at approximately 9 p.m., both children, O'Brien and Aja, go to bed. Now, originally, it was reported that Harold checked on Aja and O'Brien at 12:30 a.m. and then again at 2:30 a.m. However, O'Brien did a podcast interview where he states that him and Aja go to bed, and then around 12:30 a.m., Aja wakes up to go use the bathroom. And he knows this because he sees her get up and he turns the light on for her to help her be able to go to the bathroom. O'Brien never mentions Harold checking in at 12:30 or 2:30. So again, the exact versions of events is unclear, but we can ascertain one thing. We have three people that are awake in the house around 12:30 to 2:30 a.m. Harold is awake. O'Brien is awake. Aja is awake. Aquila, we assume, is in the house somewhere, but there's no reports of what she was doing on this evening. The point being, it wasn't the dead of night. Like, it's not like nobody is awake, everybody is fast asleep, and Aja is able to just get up and leave without raising any alarms. There is activity happening in the house as late as 12:30 a.m. and possibly as late as 2:30 a.m. So there are two options. Option A is that if we assume that Aja has some plan to run away or sneak out, she then must also have the ability to wake up on command without any external alarms. She also has to somehow know what time it is, despite the power being knocked out earlier in the night. She has to sneak past O'Brien, who states that he would always hear her when she got up to use the restroom. She has to sneak past her parents, one of whom had just checked on them. She then has to exit the house, close the door, and begin walking to a still unknown destination for a still unknown reason in the freezing rain without a coat. Now, I've explained how logistically this is impossible, the waking up without the alarm clock. But physically, we're also approaching the realm of impossibility, because one of the most understated aspects of this case is the fact that it was 45 to 53 degrees that night, heavy wind, heavy rain. So after about 5 minutes in these conditions, Aja would have been visibly discomfort. She would have been shivering. She would have been soaking wet. She would have had to have walked a mile at the very least to reach the highway. So that's about 20 minutes on its own. And then there's another 30 minutes at minimum that have to pass between the two witness sightings. So she has to be outside in these conditions for 40 minutes. And none of the witnesses report her as shivering or being soaking wet, etc. So I don't see how that's possible. I don't see how it's possible she can wake up and leave. And I don't see how it's possible she can physically walk a mile and a half in these conditions without a coat and show no signs of discomfort. Which leads us to option B, is that something else happened in the house. Someone from the house takes her via car, maybe, drops her off alongside the highway so she can be seen walking along the highway. The dogs never track her scent outside of the house. or even inside of the shed, which we'll get to. So there's no evidence that she walked through her residential neighborhood to get through the highway. Also, how many times have you been trying to sneak through the house at night just to get a snack from the refrigerator? And every step that you take, it sounds like a landmine going off. Even your own heartbeat, it seems like everybody in the world can hear it. Where would she have even gotten the nerve to do this? Nonetheless, at approximately 4:30 a.m., several drivers see who we presume to be Aja walking along Highway 18. The first sighting is Jeff Rupp, who was driving. He sees what he believes is a small child walking. So he does like a U-turn to get a better look and then turns around again to continue in the direction that he was driving. He says that Aja ran off of the road into the shrubbery. We guess because Jeff Rupp was spooking her, probably because he's doing U-turns on the highway. This goes back to my point that I made about if she doesn't want to be seen and she knows that she's drawing attention, why would she be walking along the highway in the first place? But then later on, she's seen again by the Blantons. Now, they give a different description slightly of what Jeff Rupp said. They say that they thought that Aja was a grown woman and she's walking kind of to blow off steam from like a domestic dispute. This is kind of interesting because they don't describe her as having the book bag. Now, one of two things could be true. This could be a separate person, it's a different person, or Aja could have removed her book bag somewhere. We don't know. However, if we do assume that this is Aja, we can eliminate the idea that she's going to this convenience store on the highway because she had the time to walk there and walk back home in between the 30 minutes between these two witness sightings. But she's in essentially the same location, 30 minutes apart. And as I mentioned, it's just not physically feasible for her to have been on the highway that entire time in those conditions and not show any signs of distress or discomfort. No shivering, no crying. None of the witnesses even describe her as appearing wet. They say that she was walking at a moderate pace. She looked like she knew where she was going. This is completely contrary to what you would expect for a 9-year-old that's walking a mile and a half in these conditions. Furthermore, there were other sightings. I was watching this news report and this random guy just is in this report and he says that he saw Aja or believes he did, but he's not in any newspapers or any police filings. So I would assume that there are other witnesses then that we just don't know about. The police just haven't mentioned, which would give credence to the idea that that was Aja. It was her out there, which is the thesis of the video, that she was paraded out there so people would see her. Nonetheless, at 6:30 a.m., Aquila wakes up. She wakes up to give the children a bath since they couldn't take it the previous night because the power was out. She goes into the room and she asks O'Brien where Aja is, but he doesn't know. She looks throughout the house, in the closets. She looks next door because there's family that live next door and in this neighborhood. She goes across the street to her mom's. That would be Aja's grandma's house, but nothing. She's not anywhere to be found. So Aquila tells Harold to call 911. Now, the 911 call is where all of the hairs on my neck stand up, because I want you to understand that this is right after Aja has disappeared. We don't know about the sightings on the highway. Nobody knows what has happened, right? But you will see how Harold is injecting narratives into the call. Okay, the call. This was at approximately 6:39 a.m. Dispatcher, 911. Harold. Yes, I'd like to report a child missing. Pause. I'd like to report a child missing is what I would say if I was at the mall and there was a child missing. If it was my child missing, I would say my child is missing. But let's give Harold the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he's just trying to be official and businesslike to place this call, even though, like I said, this has just happened. We're assuming that Harold has also just woken up and has been given the news that Aja's not in the house anymore. So how he's switching automatically to I need to be professional and official in the span of a few minutes, I'm not sure. But let's continue. Dispatcher, from where? Harold, from my house. Dispatcher, what's your address? Harold, 3404 Oak Crest Drive. Dispatcher, is this an apartment? Harold, yeah. Dispatcher, which apartment? Harold, apartment 3406. Dispatcher, okay, is she missing from 3404 or 3406? Harold, 3404, I mean. Pause. So he gives the wrong house number, apartment number. I know some people think that's a big deal. I don't see how you can give the wrong address, but maybe he's nervous. But so now we would have to say that at the start of the call, he's just very professional, very businesslike, very official. But 20 seconds into the call, now he's nervous and can't remember his address. But let's continue. Dispatcher, there's not an apartment number? Harold, no. Dispatcher, what's your name? Harold. Harold Degree. Dispatcher, your phone number, Harold? Harold, he gives his phone number. The next door neighbor said she went down the road and said she just seen a kid down the road. Pause. What neighbor? There's never been any record of any neighbor or anybody telling Harold that they saw Aja or anybody else walking down the road. Furthermore, let's think about this. Let's say somebody has told Harold that they saw Aja walking down the road. Why wouldn't he go walk down the road to see if it's Aja? That's actionable information. He doesn't need to call 911 in that scenario. He can just go check it out for himself. If he does that and it's not Aja, there's no reason to mention it in this phone call. It's completely irrelevant. If somebody told him that they saw Aja walking up the street and he didn't go and check it out and just call 911, that's a big red flag because, again, you don't need to call 911. You could just go and look for yourself. She's right up the street. So the worst case scenario is that he's just making this up, that there's no neighbor. He's just saying this just to put the idea out there that she's outside, that she's walking around. She's doing this on her own free will. So in either scenario, Harold needs to explain his actions, because if somebody did tell him that Aja was walking up the street and he went and checked it out and it wasn't her, why is he mentioning it in the phone call? He didn't mention that Aquila checked the grandma's house or the aunt's house. If he just made it up, then obviously that's a guilty conscience. I mean, he's just making up information. Or if somebody told him this and he didn't check, that's a red flag, because why would you not check? Why would you just call 911 and not go investigate it yourself? It's right up the street. So whatever Harold's reasoning for mentioning this in the phone call, it doesn't make any sense. Nonetheless, let's continue. Dispatcher, when did you last see her, Harold? Harold, last time I went to bed. She was in the bed. We got up this morning, called her to get up to go to school, and she wasn't in there. And her book bag's missing and her pocketbook. Pause. Okay, so he says that he saw her last night before he went to bed. So this must be one of the checks that he made, either at 12:30 or 2:30. Now, he mentions that her book bag is gone, which is not a red flag. I think that is something that you would notice. If she was not there, she would take her book bag. So like if for example, if I'm not at my house, I would take my phone. If my phone is not at the house, you can conclude that I'm not at the house. However, he mentions that her pocketbook is missing. Now, I'm not 100% sure that he's referencing the Tweety Bird pocketbook, to be fair. But if he is, I don't see how she's had it long enough for it to be an item that you would notice was missing if she's missing, if that makes sense. She just got the Tweety Bird pocketbook less than a week before she disappeared. Now, I don't know if they made a big deal of this. Maybe they paraded it around the house, and that's what made it memorable. to Harold in this 911 call. I don't find that likely though. I don't see how a purse that she won at school a few days before she disappeared is something that you're bringing up in the phone call as evidence that she's disappeared. The book bag, yes. She may have had the book bag for years at this point. The purse, no. And this is just my opinion, but it sort of leads me to think that he put the purse in the book bag to consolidate the two items. But that's just my opinion. The police have not named anybody a suspect, much less Harold or anybody in the family. But let's continue. Dispatcher. So you don't know if she got dressed or if she still got on her bedclothes or what? Harold, we don't know. Dispatcher. Was the door open or anything? Harold, no. Her brother sleeps in there with her, and when he was in there, he didn't hear her when she got up. Pause. How can Harold assume that she got up? How would he know that? For all anybody knows, to this day, really, there was already an offender in the house, and the offender abducted her from the home and carried her out. How can he assume that she got up? I mean, and at this point, we don't even know about the witness sightings. We don't know about the items in the shed. This is at most 2 to 3 hours after Aja left the house, if she did leave the house. So for him to get, again, on the 911 call and insinuate that she left, that people have seen her leaving, that items from the house that she just got are missing. I mean, let's go through the emotional tone of the call. He starts off very official, very businesslike. I'd like to report a child missing. Then he's nervous. He can't remember his address. Then he's giving information that may or may not be true. And even if it is true, it is actionable information and therefore irrelevant in a 911 call. Then he's giving information about items that are missing, from which it wouldn't just be common knowledge that her pocketbook was missing, therefore she's missing. And then he's straight up saying that she got up. He's straight up implying that she got up and left the house when it's impossible for him to know that unless he saw this happen. Let's continue. About 2 days after Aja disappeared, some items were found in a shed along Highway 18 where she was seen walking. These items include a pencil, candy wrapper, and a picture of an African-American girl about the same age as Aja. Nobody knows who this girl is. She's never been identified. Now, some people think that these items may have been planted in the shed to give the idea that she was in the shed, but she really wasn't. And the dogs don't track her to the shed. I don't think it matters if she was in this shed or not, because we know that she was all along the highway. So whether or not she went to the shed is kind of irrelevant. And in the case of the weather conditions, the shed didn't have a door on it. So it would have still been cold and very uncomfortable for Aja, even in this shed. Some people think that maybe she went here to seek shelter. Maybe she did. However, if the plan was to meet up with someone here at this shed, you have all of the original problems that I've already mentioned, as far as her needing to be able to wake up without an alarm clock, her needing to be able to sneak out of the house, her needing to walk to this shed in the freezing rain without a coat on, and not show any signs of discomfort, no shivering, no crying when the witnesses drive by, and the fact that there's no evidence that she was talking to any stranger or planning to meet them. And also the dogs do not track her scent in the shed. Now, I do wonder if they had tracked the parents, maybe they would have picked up a scent in the shed. Again, just speculating here. Nonetheless, about 18 months after Aja disappeared, on August 3rd, 2001, her backpack was found about 30 miles north of Shelby. It was wrapped in 2 black trash bags and appears to have been tossed or dumped at this site off of the road here. A contractor who was working on preparing the site for a new home found the backpack. And so he goes through the backpack. He sees the name Aja Degree on it. I guess he doesn't connect the missing person case with this backpack. He tells his wife about it, and his wife is the one that recognizes the name and says that he needs to call the police. So he calls the police, and they come and take the backpack. Now, just as a side note, I think that that's a very weird story. Like, you're a contractor, and so you find this random junk in a field, and you go through it. I've never gone through a backpack or any trash that I found in trash bags. That's just me. But then he goes in the bag and looks at it, and nothing must have thrown up red flags, right? Like, people speculate that there was blood in the bag or something, but that couldn't have been the case if he didn't call 911 originally. Like, if he just sees a name and doesn't think much of it. But then to then tell his wife about it is kind of where my eyebrows are raised, because who tells their wife about random trash that they find on the job site? It's a very odd way to discover what is a crucial piece of evidence in a missing child's case. But furthermore, the inside of the bag is even more baffling, because inside of her bag, there was a New Kids on the Block t-shirt that did not belong to Aja. Nobody knows where this shirt came from. And also, they did find DNA inside of the bag. Now, in 2001, it wasn't usable. They couldn't test it. They couldn't get a name from the DNA. But fast forward, we now know whose DNA it was inside of the bag. Okay? Now, before I tell you whose DNA it was, first let me explain why it is irrelevant. Because we don't know when this t-shirt got into the bag. It could have been that Aja got the t-shirt at the sleepover. She could have found the t-shirt and put it in her bag. The offender or offenders could have gone to the Salvation Army and bought a random t-shirt and put it in the bag, and then intentionally planted the bag so that it would be found, and therefore evidence on the t-shirt would lead to somebody else. We have no idea. The chain of custody for the bag is broken, and the chain of custody for the shirt, for that matter, is also broken. So I mentioned that they found 2 DNA profiles on or in the bag. The first profile was of Russell Underhill, who died in 2004 at the age of 54. Now, he had chronic health issues and was actually living in an assisted living facility. The second person's DNA that was in or on the bag was Anna Lee Dedman, who was 15 at the time of Aja's disappearance. Now, this is important because Russell Underhill lived in the care of Roy and Connie Dedman, who owned and operated an assisted living facility. So that's the connection between Russell Underhill, Anna Lee Dedman, and Roy and Connie Dedman. Now, there are 2 trains of thought as it relates to these individuals. Number one is that Russell Underhill killed Aja and buried or, disposed of the bag. And it's as simple as that. The second is that maybe this was a hit and run type of scenario where Aja is out, she's walking around, and maybe Anna Lee or somebody else hits her. They don't want to go to the police. Maybe they're drinking and driving, so they put her in a car and dispose of her elsewhere. Those are possible scenarios. The issue is still that you have to figure out why Aja left the house and how she did that. And also, you have to figure out how she's not freezing to death by walking out in these weather conditions. But let's assume that Russell Underhill did kidnap Aja. Why would he take a shirt from his house and put it in her bag and then wrap her bag in 2 trash bags to preserve it? Why not just destroy the bag? Regardless of who's involved in the case, why would they just not destroy the bag? Also, it's not like they could be framing somebody. People knew about DNA evidence in 2001. They didn't know about touch DNA evidence. They certainly didn't think that, 20 years from now, this will come back to somebody else. It's an intentional decision to put the shirt in the bag, but there's no incentive to do that. Nobody has any incentive to place an item from their personal house into this bag if they are involved in this disappearance. That doesn't make any sense. So my theory, this is just my theory, just my belief, is that if the family is involved and they did orchestrate this to where, okay, we're going to have Aja walk alongside the highway so that she can be seen and we'll plant this evidence, it's not that far-fetched that they would go to like the Salvation Army, buy a random shirt and put it in this bag and then dump the bag so that it's not destroyed because it's too personal to them. It is their daughter. It's their whatever the case may be. So they don't want to destroy the last kind of physical connection they have to Aja. So they wrap the bag and in a way preserve the bag and put it in a location where it's not that far. I mean, it's only 30 miles away. This is how I know this was a local person, because if this was like a truck driver from out of town, the bag would have been found 6 states away, not 30 miles up the road. But that's just my little personal pet theory for the bag. But again, I don't think you can really draw too much evidence or evidential value from it because the chain of command for both the bag and the shirt have been broken. Lastly, I want to discuss the issue surrounding this green car and the tip that the FBI received. Shortly after Aja's disappearance, apparently somebody called and said that they saw Aja being abducted or being pulled into a green vehicle. Now, the FBI didn't release this tip until 2016. So 16 years after Aja's abduction, which it must be that they didn't believe the tip. Because again, this is actionable information. Somebody is saying, hey, there's the missing child that I saw on TV. Yeah, I saw them pulled into a green car. That's actionable information. You would think that you would want the public to be on the lookout for this green car. Now, either they didn't take the tip very seriously, they didn't believe it, or somebody just dropped the ball. It could be one of the two, but I find it least likely that they did believe it, but just decided to not release the tip, especially after 15 years. So if they didn't believe the tip, why not? Why would you not believe what this person is saying? Because it's kind of hard to misidentify a child being pulled and forced into a car, right? So what's the rationale for not believing it? Again, just my personal pet theory is that I think the authorities know or have some reasonable assumption about what happened, and they didn't believe the green car tip because they don't believe she was outside to be abducted. But they just have no evidence to suggest or prove that. So we're in this holding pattern with the case. Again, just my theory, just how I see the case. I could be wrong. And lastly, because I know someone will bring it up in the comments, I'll address the text messages between the Deadman sisters regarding the police investigating Aja's disappearance as possibly a hit and run. Now, for what it's worth, the Deadmans did own a green car, and the police did end up towing this car and investigating it. However, I don't think that the text message exchange between the sisters is implying any guilt. It's just them saying what the police think happened. And the police, like I said, could very well be misdirecting the case because they know what happened or have a hunch of what happened, but they want to make people feel comfortable. I'm not sure, but either way, the text messages don't point to any obvious guilt, in my opinion. And even if you believe that this was a hit and run, you then have to explain why Aja got up and left the house that night, for what reason, and how didn't she freeze to death or show any obvious signs of being in terrible weather when she didn't have a coat. And in a hit and run scenario, why would they then take a shirt from their house or somewhere else and put it in the bag and then preserve the bag? Again, why not just destroy the bag? You'd have to answer those questions as well. So, At the end of the day, that's kind of how I see the case as a whole. I think it's far more likely that something happened inside of the house that night. What that was or why, I have no idea. I wouldn't feel comfortable speculating on that because there's nothing to suggest exactly what happened. But yeah, that's how I see it. And hopefully we do get justice for Aja at some point. I would love to see this case solved. Um, and that's that. And this is just for educational purposes. Again, for the fifth time, this is just my opinion. The police have not named anybody as a suspect. You should not take this video as, uh, rationale to go harass people or to go question people. Don't do that, please. Just, think about it. I just want to give people a new way to think about these cases. Oftentimes, it's just like AI regurgitating facts. That's so pointless. Like, you could just read the Wikipedia. I think that what we should be doing as citizens is trying to figure out processes to get closer to the truth, and not just kind of regurgitate known facts. So that's what I'm doing here. Let me know what you guys think, and justice for Aja Degree.